Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. We are finally at the very last Bible study video. I'm so excited. I know I said in the last video that we would probably do a review video, and I might still do that, but other than that, this is going to be the actual last lesson of the Bible study. So I'm so glad to finally be getting this video recorded. Last week I recorded, but before that I think I skipped 2-3 weeks again. So I'm glad to finally have this underneath my belt and we can move on to a new study or a new series. And I'm so sorry for the flexibility of these videos. There are 30 lessons in the entire book. The 30th lesson is the review lesson of the entire series, of the entire 2 books together. So altogether there's 30 lessons. The 30th lesson is the review lesson of all 29. 29 is the very last one. As far as studying goes, and then this book included lessons 16 through 29, and that is what this Bible study series has been over, was just this book. So this is lesson 29, and this is going to cover Revelation chapters 21 and 22, the 2 final chapters of the book. I'm going to hit the high points for you and do a little bit of discussion here. I'm not going to do the reading portion, of course. I don't find that very many people are interested in that, and it is a little bit boring to kind of sit through and be read to. Okay, so I'm going to open up the Bible app on my phone and go through this with you so that I make sure I'm doing everything correctly, saying everything correctly. Okay, so starting in Revelation 21, verse 1, the first thing that is mentioned in that chapter is that the old heaven and earth passes away and there will be a new heaven and earth. It also mentions that there will be no more sea, which is interesting. It doesn't go into detail, of course, as to why there will be no sea, and we don't have anything in our notes reflecting as to why there might be no sea. But one of the things that I did find interesting was how much more earth we would have if there were no sea. The sea covers, I think, 3/4 of the earth. So that's a lot of land that is not being used. So could you only imagine how much bigger the earth would feel if we were able to utilize 100% of it? I thought that was a pretty interesting thing to think about. Okay, so Revelation chapter 21 verse 1 says, "Then I saw a new heaven and earth, for the first heaven and earth passed away, there was no longer any sea." One of the verses that we are referenced to review is Isaiah 65, 17 and 18, and I'm going to read those to you. And it says, "See, I will create new heavens and a new earth. The former things will not be remembered, nor will they come to mind. But be glad and rejoice forever that in what I will create, for I will create Jerusalem to be a delight and its people a joy." So one of the things that it mentions in this book, but it does not mention in Revelation, is that the former things will not be remembered. And that's just something interesting. It's neat when you can kind of compile different verses in different books together to kind of help you understand more about the Bible. And one of the questions that it asks in our book is, why do we feel like the old earth would not be remembered? And this was a lesson that I actually did not attend class for, so I didn't get to hear everyone else's answer, but my personal answer for that would be just that there would really be no need for us to remember the old earth. That way we could get rid of sin once and for all, completely. And that would be my personal answer. I don't think it's a matter of right or wrong. I think it's more of a personal question. But that is something to think about. Why we would no longer remember the old earth. And then it asks us to read Isaiah 66 verse 22, and that says, "As the new heavens and the new earth that I will make will endure before me, declares the Lord, so your name and descendants endure." And that's just something that it asks us to read to sort of point out how permanent will the new heaven and earth be, and the new heaven and earth is said to endure. So it's going to be pretty permanent. And I'm going to move on to this topic before I finish out the rest of my notes for Revelation chapter 21. One of the next sections in our book asked us to read some of the other scripture that sort of describes what heaven is like. And it asked us, wrote out the verses for us in our page here, and then it asked us to kind of underline anything that we found appealing about heaven, or anything that we found comforting or interesting or anything. And so one of those verses was John 14, 2 and 3. And I noticed that it said we would have, my Father's house have many mansions. One of the other things I found in there was that it says, I will come again and receive you to myself. That's where I am. That where I am, there you may also be. So that's a really comforting verse. Hebrews 11, verses 10 and 16 points out that the builder and the maker of, heaven is God. And so, it's going to be done right. And that it is a heavenly country, and that he has prepared a city for them. So country, city, those are pretty large. So it's not going to be shabby. It's going to be pretty big and pretty neat. And then the last scripture it gives us for that was 1 Peter 1, 3 through 5. In that verse, I had underlined a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead to an inheritance incorruptible and undefiled, and that does not fade away, reserved in heaven for you, who are kept by the power of God through faith for salvation, ready to be revealed in the last time. So incorruptible, undefiled, does not fade away, those of course referring to heaven, and so that's kind of neat. I actually covered all of the verses. I'm going to kind of lay the chapter out for you. Since I'm sort of having to conduct this Bible study on my own, unfortunately I wasn't able to go to class, and I don't have any notes to go by. I pretty much had to get everything from the book, from the chapter itself. So we've covered verses 1, and in verse 2 it says there will be a new holy city. Hold on. So in chapter 21 verses 2 and 3, I wanted to dispute an argument. This is going to be controversial for any of those who might be watching this who believe any certain way. But one of the things that I have learned about is that there are people who believe that the bride of Jesus, when the world comes to an end, is going to be like a woman, where he's going to actually marry a woman, and there will be a mother of God figure. And when I was reading through this verse, for me it kind of disputed that. So I think there are verses in Revelation that they get this idea from, and it has a lot to do with Jesus referring to his church as the bride. There's a lot of scripture, I think, that doesn't seem to clarify that the bride is the church, but for me these two verses seem to clarify that pretty well. So I wanted to mention them to you and mention that point about it, and I think it's pretty neat. So this is Revelation chapter 21 verses 2 and 3, and it just says, I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, dressed beautifully for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. So verse 2 seems to specify that the bride is going to be the city of Jerusalem that's going to come down out of heaven. And then verse 3 seems pretty much specifies that that God's people are going to be the ones who dwell with him in this holy city. And it just doesn't mention, a woman specifically, or a bride as far as marrying a woman. I'm having a hard time putting this all together, but it seems to dispute that theory for me. And I just thought that was interesting. So in mentioning those two verses, I wanted to bring up that point. And then, of course, I liked verse 3 where it said that they will dwell with God, and God will be with them, and God will be their God. That's kind of comforting. Verse 4 says that the old order of things will pass away. There will be no more death, no more pain, and no more tears. Verse 5 says that he who is seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. Then he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. And he goes on to say in verses 6 through 8 It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water without cost from the spring of the water of life. Those who are victorious will inherit all of this, and I will be their God, and they will be my children. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all liars, they will be consigned to the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death. And I know that that scripture gets very specific, but I think that summed up, it's just stating that the people who are saved will go to heaven, and that the people who are unsaved will not enter the gates of heaven. Verse 9 and 10 also goes along really well with verses 2 and 3 and what I mentioned about the Mother of God and Jesus marrying a woman as the bride. Verses 9 and 10 says, one of the angels who had one of the 7 bowls full of the 7 last plagues came and said to me, come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. So this is where as you're reading, you think, okay, they're going to reveal who the wife or the bride is going to be. And then verse 10, it goes on to say, and he carried me away in the spirit to a mountain great and high, and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. So, I mean, that says pretty specifically, at least for me, that the bride is specifically going to be the city of Jerusalem, and therefore, the church of God. So if you read on, verses 11 through 23 will describe what that city of Jerusalem looks like in a lot of detail. It tells you measurement, tells you the jewels and things like that are used. It mentions that there are 12 gates. The 12 tribes of Israel's names are written on each of the 12 gates. There are 12 foundations, I believe, as well, and each of the names of the 12 apostles' names are written on each one of those foundations as well. So you can read through there to kind of get a better idea. But basically, it sounds to me like it's going to be dazzling, shiny, beautiful, made of jewels, and just gorgeous. Verse 22 points out that there will be no temple in the city. Back in the Old Testament, there was a temple where you would go. I'm not sure the details of that, but you would go for worship of God. In this new city of Jerusalem, there will be no temple because God will be present. He will be there physically. Verse 23 was pretty interesting. Verse 23 noted that there will be no more sun or moon, that the glory of God is going to provide light for the city. There is also a mention of, that's later. There is also a mention of no more night, but that's in chapter 22, verse 5, and that was really interesting to me as well. I can't imagine a world with no night, but that would probably be a pretty good thing. And verse 27 mentions that those whose names are written in the book of life are the ones who are going to be able to enter into the city of Jerusalem. So now we are going to move on to Revelation chapter 20, and I also have notes for these verses as well, and I have something I'm going to read to you out of my book. So verses 1 through 3 speaks about the river of the river of water of life. The river of the water of life. That is going to run through the city. On either side of that river is the tree of life, and there is no more curse. It does say that in the Bible. It says, the beginning of verse 3 says, no longer will there be any curse. So you might ask yourself, what curse? And our book asks us to go back to Genesis 3:17, which is where there is a curse mentioned, and I'm going to read that to you today. But basically, if you don't want to do the study of the verse itself, you can probably conclude that the curse, just if you have general knowledge of the Bible, the curse would be all of the things that were placed on, all of the things that humans were punished with back in the beginning of Genesis when sin was first done. It says, to Adam he said, because you listened to your wife and ate fruit from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will not eat food from it all the days of your life. So basically all of the things that are lost in Genesis because of sin are sort of regained in Revelation when the new heaven is created and the new city of Jerusalem is created. And then there are a few verses out of Revelation chapter 22 that I wanted to read to you. Verse 7 is written in red, and it is words from God, or Jesus or God. And it says, "Look, I'm coming soon. Blessed is the one who keeps the words of this prophecy written in this scroll." And I thought that was a really interesting verse. Verse 10 also says, "Then he told me, do not seal up the words of the prophecy of this scroll, because the time is near." So I feel like that applies to everyone who reads and understands Revelation. If you are, if God reveals the book of Revelation to you and you really understand it, I don't believe that you are to keep it a secret. I believe that is something that you should feel compelled to share with others, because you want to keep others from entering hell if you can, and if you want to save as many people as you can. Verse 14 and 15 I wanted to read as well. It says, "Blessed are those who wash their robes, that they may have the right to the tree of life and may go through the gates of the city. Outside are the dogs, those who practice magic arts, the sexually immoral, the murderers, the idolaters, and everyone who loves and practices falsehood." And again, of course, that's another list of those people who are not going to be able to come into heaven. But again, I think that sums up to mean saved versus unsaved. And of course, one of the last things that is mentioned in that chapter, or that is seems to be important to me, is found in verses 18 and 19, and that is, do not add anything to this prophecy, do not take anything away, and that sort of thing. So one of the interesting things that was said in one of the last classes I attended, and has kind of stuck on my mind and probably will forever, was that it's just a little fun fact. Satan was first mentioned in the Bible just 3 chapters in, and Satan was last mentioned in the Bible 3 chapters before the end. And I think that's so interesting. You would think that that would not be coincidental, that would have to be done on purpose, but who really knows? But it's a really interesting fact. And that's going to be all of my video today. I feel like I didn't have a whole lot to share with you as far as Revelations. I feel like there's so many more things we could talk about, so many more things we can go into detail about, so many more arguments we could have, so many everything. I feel like there's so much more we could get into with this book, with these 2 chapters that I've shared and everything. But that is all I have for you today. The most interesting thing that I learned about this study was the period of the 1,000 years, which I covered in the very last video that I did. That was the most interesting thing I found about this study. Probably the first time that I've ever heard of anything like that. I don't remember hearing of anything like that when I've read Revelation on my own or have been taught Revelation. So that was one of the things that I learned during this study. Of course, the best part of Revelation is learning that you're going to be in heaven and that everything is going to be made new and just beautiful and wonderful, and that sounds pretty cool. But please leave any comments below of any opinions you might have, any new perspectives you can bring, or just to let me know that you liked the video or that you enjoyed the Bible study. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for being a part of this series. And if I decide to do the review video, that will be posted next Friday. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!